and welcome to our last panel here at ArCONa. We are talking about intersectional witchcraft. ArCONa benefits Bat Conservation International's mission to end bat extinctions worldwide. Bats are night pollinators critical to our ecosystem, so please, if you learned something today, donate to support our fundraiser. You can find the donate link in chat, which I will let the chat mods pop that up for you. And it's also below the stream if you're looking for it. And our final bat fact of ArCONa is the University of Tennessee researchers found that the Mexican free-tailed bat could reach speeds of up to 100 miles per hour, making it by far the fastest mammal on Earth. That is wild. I love that. Gotta love bats. And also, if you do donate during the panel, this adorable little like bat gif like comes up on screen and he's like flapping around. It's real cute. So you're gonna want to do that. We are actually $300 away from our goal of $3,000. Like we are so close, y'all. Like so freaking close. So this is the time to do it. This is the time to donate. Don't forget to check out ArCONa Alley, which is our artist alley as well. There's so much good stuff on the ArCONa website and happening right here on Twitch. So without further ado, I am going to go around and let everyone introduce themselves. Let's see. Let's start. I'm gonna go clockwise. How about that? So first up is Kelly.
Hey. Well, hello, I am Kelly, otherwise known as Green Merdragon, pretty much everywhere. And this is Cora. I did promise chat during the last panel, if we hit our goal, that I would bring the puppy on screen. So this is Cora. She does not have a bat costume, but next year for ArCONa, I will make a bat costume. So I'm gonna set her down. But yes, so yes, I am Kelly, Green Merdragon. Some of you have seen me around chat modding. I actually am a high school English teacher, and I moonlight as a tiara maker. So
they're so pretty.
Yeah, if you head over to Twitter right now, I'm actually giving away this bat-inspired tiara that we made yesterday. Yeah, donate and you can get more entries into winning a tiara. You can check that out. Yeah, Green Merdragon on Twitter. So that is me. Someone else talk, please.
Next up is Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jess, pronouns they, them. I am a writer and editor. You can find me online. You can find my Twitter at WriteJessR and all of the things that I do, because I'm not going to list all of it, it's too much, on my website, writejess.com.
Let's and Lucia.
Hi, I'm Lucia. I run Seer Sword on everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. That's where you can find me. I do TTRPG stuff. We just released the Islands of Sina Una back in October, which is our pre-colonial Philippines inspired supplement for 5e. And we're going to physical soon. It's just, COVID times and print things. But once we're done with that, I'm hoping to start leading some more cool projects and also start integrating more of my witchcraft into my everyday stuff. So it also, if it's okay with Lisa, I would like to up the stakes on the donations. We'll say that at least if it's okay, I'll say that if we get to like the 3,000 goal by the end of the stream, I'll do another giveaway package of dice.
Ooh.
I think it's 4 packages, 4 sets. It's the Sina Una set, the Venus spell set, the Violet Incantation set, and the Lotus of the Naiad set. So I'll do another package if we get to 3,000.
So pretty.
Wow.
Awesome.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Lucia. That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll try and get there.
Let's do it, chat. This is like, oh my God. I am so excited. So now is the time. please donate. We would love to have you donate because it's all going into a very good cause, which is these really cute bats. All right. And before I dive in, I was about to not even introduce myself. My name is Leona. You can find me on Twitter at the Leona Maple. I am your moderator for this panel. I am a intersectionality consultant. I run Maple Intersectionality Consulting, where I help primarily TTRPGs, but basically just about anyone who is looking to make their work more inclusive and intersectional through different means such as sensitivity reading or consultations. I'm also hoping with the T-girl in the chat over there, we are working in the background on a little something called Witchcrafting, Intersectional Witchery, and it is a podcast that we are hoping to release sometime in the near future. So please feel free to follow either one of us on Twitter. She is at Silky Dreams. I am at the Leona Maple, and we'll let you know whenever that comes out. And you are the first people to hear about it because I've only mentioned it yesterday and today, and nobody else knows about this. So yeah, that's me. That's a little bit about me. Let's see. We are now $43 away from $2,800. So we're getting there. We are getting there. Before we dive in, I'm actually going to start with a little blurb that's on the ArCONa website about intersectionality. So intersectionality is a term that was coined in 1989 by Professor Kimberlé Crenshaw to describe how race, class, gender, and all other individualized characteristics intersect with one another and overlap. Frequently, conversations around intersections talk about those that are marginalized. For marginalized individuals, practicing witchcraft can be an empowering and healing experience. Having an intersectional practice ensures that we are not inadvertently causing harm while we further our spiritual journey. In this panel, we will explore how witchcraft and intersectionality go hand in hand and how you can make your practice more intersectional. So that's a little bit of background about what we're going to be talking about and where intersectionality came from to begin with. So I'm going to start by asking our panelists, what is your witchy background? Are you a new witch? Are you an experienced witch? What brought you to witchcraft? All that kind of stuff. Tell us a little about you.
I'll go ahead and jump in.
Yay, okay.
Good job. Yeah, so background wise, I think, at least for me, I was raised Christian, so that was kind of like a hurdle that I had to kind of get over with myself. But I started maybe a couple years ago, just because I found that there was so much more like control in it, like over myself and over my own feelings. And then as I started doing more research, I found that on my mother's side, I have like bloodlines that practice witchcraft. So I've been kind of trying to incorporate like things that are kind of well known and well researched, as well as like what I know about my own heritage and those things, and trying to incorporate those. So that's my background so far.
Very cool. Who'd like to go next?
I talked a lot about my witchy background yesterday, so I won't go super in depth about it. But the panel that I was on with Leona yesterday, it was a discussion by and for beginner witches. I spent a long time talking about it, but basically I would say I'm like a medium new witch, where I've been sort of doing it for a long time, but haven't really been as like intentional and focused about it for very long. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Absolutely. Kelly, what about you? Oh, I don't think we can hear you.
Let's see, does that work?
Yes.
I'm notorious for not unclicking the mute button. So I was also raised Christian. I was very lucky to be raised in a extremely progressive Christian denomination that's very social justice forward and everything like that. And I actually am Christian. I am a Christian witch, and I will talk about the weight that carries as we get into this, recognizing that as a Christian witch, that Christianity is one of the major oppressors of witches and of pretty much every marginalized identity we're going to talk about here. So But yeah, so I've always been very much, my spiritual practice has always been very much witchy, but it wasn't until this last year or two that it became more of an intentional, oh, I am actually practicing witchcraft, not just practicing these elements of what elements that I see in a lot of sort of liberation theology, queer theology, Christians who are sort of rejecting a lot of the crap,
Mhm.
are actually very witchy, and realizing that I had sort of been practicing those things. And so now I'm just being more, like Jess said, being more intentional about it now.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think it's always kind of a good reminder for anyone in the audience that might be newer to witchcraft, that witchcraft and religion don't have to necessarily be the same thing. They can be a spiritual practice versus a religion, so you can have both. And that's the case for me, actually. I technically, if you were going to put me in a box, identify as Hindu, but I also do a little witchcraft, and I've become a lot more intentional about that in the past year. So I consider myself a fairly newbie witch, who's just really trying to be very thoughtful and mindful of how I do things, such as avoiding close practices or, things that really aren't my place to pick up. And also, as I mentioned yesterday in the beginner witch panel, at Hindu weddings, we like invite our ancestors into a clay pot. So I've just been like, wait a minute, that sounds kind of witchy right there. Like, what is that, So I've been trying to do a little bit of research and dig around and see like where the witchcraft history is within Hinduism itself. So if I ever find anything there, I'll let y'all know. But I do want to move on to our next question, which is, what does intersectionality mean to you? And I don't necessarily want this to be a sort of like, this is your opportunity to describe your intersections. You are here because you are absolutely a valid representative. I don't want you to feel like you need to justify your presence here, but I do want to know what the word intersectionality means to you, and maybe even what it means in the context of your practice.
Oh man.
We're getting right into it, I know.
Yeah. I love that. I think, at least for me, like, and also like talking about being raised Christian, I think that there's so much that I've learned over the years of like doing things with intention, and all of these, like I said, just having that kind of more control over like how you feel during the day. That's kind of what I use witchcraft for. So for me, also like being educated on like my country's past and like how that's affected me and how that's like been kind of passed down. I think that witchcraft is a really good opportunity to do that research and to have those like points of contact with other heritages as well. And like with Leona yourself, like talking about Hinduism, I've learned so much about it because of its approximation to witchcraft, and also because, if I may, some of it's kind of appropriated, I think, for witchcraft. And it's like, I think that that's really important to touch on. So to me, it's very much knowing where these things cross and how we're using them with intention, and like our intention versus the result, and knowing where that is like, that's where intersectionality is for me, is like making sure if I'm crossing any lines, it's respectfully, and like I've done the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, you're not wrong. It's interesting doing kind of like exploring it like witchcraft, because it's like there's people talking about chakras and I'm just like, okay, like, like what is going on here? Where did you get your information? Like what, like there's these concepts that I've been so familiar with my whole life as just being normal things, and it's like sometimes I feel like they're exotified, sometimes I feel like they're just like, there's so many layers to like what is going on out there that it's kind of very odd to see my own heritage kind of reflected back at me in a weird way.
Reflected through a funhouse mirror?
Yeah, that is actually a great description.
Yeah.
That is absolutely a great description. So yes, you are absolutely not wrong there, but I just wanted to add that. But I will let someone else talk about what intersectionality means to them.
I can go next since I forced Jess to go next on the intro by just sitting there awkwardly. When I think about intersectionality, I am I have to start with this just to be really open about this fact. Like, yes, this is a panel on intersectionality and you have a white Christian here. Like, let's be really deliberate about that. And so for me, when I think about intersectionality, part of it is approaching it from the viewpoint of the privileged parts of my identity, that I am a Christian and that I am white, have been, as I said before, sort of the historical oppressors of witchcraft and their identities, and quite frankly, the historical oppressors of the other parts of my identity. As a queer, disabled, fat woman, I am Christian when it suits Christians to claim me. I am white when it suits white people to claim me. And so it's this really interesting balance of recognizing and incorporating practices that involve reparation and reconciliation into my practice, and also recognizing the parts of my identity that are in direct conflict with at least the societal impression of the rightful society impression of whiteness and Christianity. And so when I think about intersectionality and my identity, I think that I very much live at the intersection of some very privileged identities and some, extremely marginalized identities, and reckoning with that.
Yeah, and that juxtaposition is very, 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 very valid, and it's exactly what you said. You are part of the dominant ideal when it suits the dominant ideal, essentially. And that's super valid to have that, to feel that way and to be very mindful of that. Jess, please, I would love to hear more.
Sure. Intersectionality on its own, I think, means a lot of different things to me at different times, just sort of depending. In general, part of the importance of intersectionality to me is that it even gives me the opportunity to examine and reflect on and respect just like different aspects of myself and my family, because there are so many moving pieces for like any one person's identity, which is something that I have a lot of feelings about, especially in regards to language and how people talk about identity, which I won't get into right now. But I also used to be an English teacher, and part of what I did was teaching like rhetoric and composition through the lens of like how language impacts our identity, like how the ways we talk about identity impact how we see ourselves. And that's always been something that's very important to me. So that I think is part of it. And then in terms of how intersectionality impacts my practice, I talk again, like in the panel yesterday, I talked a lot about how I bring sort of my respect for my ancestors into my practice. And that is something that sort of like haunted me for a long time when I was younger, because for whatever reason, a lot of teachers like to do this weird history assignment where they'd be like, trace back your family as far as you can. And on my mom's side of the family, I could do that because my mom's dad immigrated to the US when he was a teenager. So there were like things that I could get from that. But on my dad's side of the family, I could trace them back to my ancestors were enslaved. They were brought to this country against their will and were enslaved, like in the southern US. And that's like, people weren't kidnapping people and like marking down where they grabbed them from. So like, I have no idea where my ancestors are from on that side. So, and that's something that always bothered me a lot, but something that has always made me feel much closer to my history and to my ancestors is learning about like traditions that my grandmother introduced me to, and getting more interested in like hoodoo and root work, and how that has helped me see, it's basically helped me gain a deeper understanding of my own identity and my own like the intersections of that are at play within myself.
Oh my God. I love that. love that. I got nothing. I got nothing there. I'm gonna veer off course a little bit, because I am so I'm actually really curious, Kelly, to hear a little bit from you about what reconciliation reparation looks like. I think that's something that we don't talk about as much, and I'm really curious to kind of hear a little bit about that.
Sure. I mentioned this really briefly in chat yesterday, and people were like, "Oh, what?" And I was like, "I'll talk about it tomorrow. It's fine." And so, yeah, for me, I, not only do I live in a country and benefit from, a country that oppresses, particularly people of color, Black and Indigenous communities, have directly benefited from, white supremacy and live in that. I also, and this is important to me, I live on the unceded territory of the Muwekma Ohlone Nation, which is the traditional home of the Tamien Ohlone people. And I I live in someone else's home. I occupy someone else's home. I benefit from these things. The fact that I'm disabled and fat does not prevent me from benefiting from these things and from living this. And so part of my identity, and this is part of how I embrace witchcraft as a practice, is being really honest with myself about what, as a Christian, what Jesus would actually have done. Jesus was a radical brown socialist. And if I'm really going to be a good Christian, it is making reparations for the harm that most of my ancestors did. Most of my ancestors were colonists. Not all of them, but most of them. And so I do things from and this is weird because this is a financial thing, but it is a very much part of my spiritual practice, is I instead of donating 10% of my income to my church, I donate 10% of my income, and it gets split between mutual aid funds for Black communities, and I also pay a land tax to the traditional inhabitants of the land I live on. And that for me is very much a spiritual craft practice, and in fact, the ritual of, it's gonna sound weird in the current modern era, the ritual of getting my credit card info in and submitting that every month, that's part of my practice. And so I do, and so, it's financial, but it's also education as a teacher, as a white teacher who teaches predominantly students of color, particularly Latinx and Black students. I can't just be neutral. Part of the way that I make reparations, and again, I can't separate this from my spirituality and my beliefs, is being every single day, being radically anti-racist, anti-colonialist, and celebrating my students with marginalized identities. And that is, I can't separate that from my craft. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I definitely think that there's, when we talk about intersectionality, we're talking about the whole person, and it makes sense that we can't necessarily, just talk about one part of it and not talk about the rest of it. So it's just really kind of cool and interesting to hear what it is that you do, and hopefully, it inspires some other folks in the audience to kind of, take steps like that, because it's one of the things that I've kind of, from what I've learned on the internet about witchcraft as I continue to explore and learn different things, is the spiritual elements of reparation and how that can be healing, like how white allies in the present day can actually work with their ancestors to heal, to really heal the generational trauma. And so it's just really neat to actually meet someone who's actually doing that and actually working through that. So I was just really, really curious to hear a little bit more about what it is that you do. So thank you for sharing.
Sorry, puppy. Yeah, so it's my version of ancestor worship. I don't worship my ancestors. I work with them to undo the harm that they caused.
It's very cool. I love that. Thank you. Really appreciate you sharing. I do want to turn it back to Jess and Lucia because I want to hear more about what are certain practices that you do, or like, is there a particular way that intersectionally applies to your witchcraft? Like, is there something really like, I know we kind of touched on it, but what are some of the more intentional things you do or intentional things that you avoid?
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
One of the sort of like smaller but like easiest things that I do for intersectionality is for a lot of my like root work and like mojo bags and things like that, I grow a lot of my own herbs, which is sort of a small thing, but it's also something that got me more invested in like recycling and just like being more intentional and aware of our planet and
Mm-hmm.
the actual like physical waste that I produce. So that's part of like also part of my practice is sort of like respect for the planet and like sort of things like that. So that's sort of like a smaller thing that I do. But then also things like um, ancestors, like research. I'm trying to learn more about just like all of the aspects of my practice. Trying to learn more about where different aspects of the practice that I learn about came from before deciding whether or not to incorporate it into my practice.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of even like spells or like mojo bags that I create, I don't follow like recipes or spells that I find online. I'll research, like I'll find something and then I'll research sort of the pieces of it to figure out where it came from and then adjust it to make sure it's something that is still true to who I am as a practitioner, as well as respectful and not appropriative of like where those things may have come from.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of, is that sort of what you were asking? Stuff like
Yeah,
that? I think that's part of what I do for like the intersectionality of my practice.
I love it.
Yeah, I think like some some things that I think so many people kind of like struggle with now is like separating everything, because I think that especially with like the internet, it's so easy to just like have a big cauldron and like throw everything in.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, at least with like especially with researching my own heritage for the book, it got me to be like, oh man, I didn't know this about myself. And about like these things that I have in my family. I have no idea what else I could be using or benefiting from that don't necessarily belong to me. So I research a lot of um, like indigenous
Mm-hmm.
practices from here in America, and as well as like I've bought books on hoodoo and voodoo before just to be like, I've seen certain things online that they're like, that's definitely from that. And I'm like, I had no idea. So just reading and researching constantly and being like, is this okay? Are we good? um, and especially like with those, because for me, being my country was colonized, it continues to be, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I do benefit from other things. Like, there's a lot of colorism that happens in the Philippines, and I benefit from that being half white. I normally don't say that I'm half Filipino anymore. I used to because that was like a big identifier for me. But it is something that I noticed as I grew up that was like, that benefited me and my family. And like, you know, there's kind of this idea of, if you go back to the Philippines and because you're so lighter than everybody there, it would be so easy for you to be a pop star. It'd be so easy for you to be a movie star. And I'm like, I used to, when I was a kid, I was like conditioned to think that that was so cool. And as I
Mm-hmm.
grew up, and I was like, that's really messed up.
Yeah.
Like, why would you say that to me? And I think that similarly, there's so much like in the world now of being shared. And like, when I was first getting into it, I bought into the idea of chakras. And then as I kept growing and kept learning, I was like, I don't really think that that's been done correctly for me. So
Mm-hmm.
those are things that I kind of put aside, and I'm like, okay, I would like to know more about that, and it really interests me. I'll do my absolute best to find somebody who has been practicing or who has been initiated, to find an author of a book in particular who has been in that culture and learn from them, so that I can kind of sort out into boxes where I'm going.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of on the subject of chakras, I'm one of those people who believe that I have no problem. I guess I look around a lot of the times in my culture and I see how appropriated things like chakras and yoga and, you know, even like turmeric milk, like it's now called golden milk, you know, like there's all these things from the culture that just show up randomly and just go boo. And I'm just like, where did you come from? How are you suddenly in pop culture? And I'm one of those people who's like, I'm very happy to share my culture, but I start to feel a little bit weird when people claim it as, no, this is mine. And I'm like, no, it's not yours, you know?
Right.
But I definitely resonate with that. And I always appreciate when people are like, no, I actively want to like intentionally learn about this from the actual people that know about this and like
Right.
make that effort. And, you know, kind of also I want to touch on the fact that I resonate with what you said about, you know, identifying as half Filipino for a while, but then moving away from that. And I don't want to go into that because that is your personal decision, but it's actually one of the reasons why I started using the words BIMPOC rather than BIPOC, to recognize folks that, you know, do have those mixed heritages, because they are just as valid and important, and I wanted to recognize them. So it's little, whenever I think about intersectionality, I always kind of consider it as the little details, I guess. I don't know if that resonates with anyone else, but I've always felt like it's the little things that make such a big difference, right? It's just the way it's being so mindful and intentional about what I say or how I do things, and
Absolutely.
trying to kind of, you know, and I try to remember that as much as possible. And I forget sometimes, but for the most part, I'm really trying super hard to be thoughtful about that. I do want to just quickly say that we are $50 away from our $3,000 goal, y'all. $50 away. So that means that all of y'all phenomenal people have gotten us $250 in the last 30 minutes. What?
Oh, amazing.
That is amazing. So please, if you can donate, if you can, it is all going towards the bats, and we would love to hit that goal. So please, if you can, we would love to see that. Shadowsfall28 in chat said Sephora had a tarot deck. Yeah, Sephora at one point actually tried to kind of hop in on this new age spirituality thing that suddenly became very popular, and that was not a good thing. I'm pretty sure they were even giving away like Palo Santo or sage in like one of their kits, and that is something that I admit I started out by using Palo Santo because I was like, oh, this is a stick, like this is easy to use, like that sounds like a great idea. Then when I started doing my research, I went, oh my god, no, I am not doing that anymore. So even as an intersectional feminist, I have made those mistakes, but I have also learned from it, and now I have a little bundle of cedar instead. And
love it. And as a note, as a note on Palo Santo, if you go with traditional spirituality, it doesn't actually work if you cut down the tree or if you bought it. It has to be given to you by someone from within that spiritual community. So like all those people, just you waste your money if you buy Palo Santo from Sephora or Urban Outfitters.
Oh my god, we hit the goal!
Yes,
we did it! $3,000 to the bats, y'all.
Amazing.
Thank
so
you.
Much money.
Thank you so much, everyone. That is phenomenal. I'm sure Lisa
pack up a little care package.
Yes! Pretty sure Lisa's crying right now, I'm sure. Or dancing with joy, one of the two. Both probably. So thank you. But yeah, no, it's you know, the intention, the thoughtfulness behind what we do is, and how we do it, I think is so important. So yeah, buying a kit from Sephora, maybe not so much. Lisa's like sob dancing in chat. I'm just very quickly taking a peek at chat to see if there was anyone else who just kind of everyone's resonating with a bunch of the things, so I'm chuckling at that. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next question. I feel like we've touched on some good practices to have or to avoid, such as smudging. What are some easy ways that our viewers can get more intersectional with their craft? And I'm also gonna just say, chat, if you have questions for our panelists, feel free to throw them in chat, and I will do my best to catch them as I can. But yeah, in the meantime, what are some tips and tricks?
My number one tip when people ask about intersectionality is always research, which we've touched on already, and you talked about when you were like researching Palo Santo and stuff. But that was, I would say, my number one response anytime anyone asks about intersectionality is just do your research. So do more than just like buying a witchcraft kit at Sephora. Like make sure you like look into what all of that stuff means, where it all came from, what the history of all of it is, and start there before diving into something with no true understanding of what you're diving into.
Yeah, I would add since we were on the topic talking about sage and Palo Santo, which you should not use. Also, sweetgrass, cedar, tobacco, if you do not belong to an indigenous community that uses those, don't use them. The good thing is, whether or not you're trying to do smoke cleansing, which isn't actually what smudging is, by the way, entirely. But if you're trying to do smoke cleansing or other kinds of work with herbs, there are so many other options that come from, that first of all, probably come from the, culture that either you are from or that are not endangered. You look at juniper, mugwort, vervain, pine, mints, and bays are really great. So if you're thinking about sort of those areas, there's lots of things. And this all comes back to what Jess said about research. If you're like, I identify with this practice, but it is not mine to take, look at the practice. Why do they do what they do? Why do they use the thing they use? And say, okay, which part of this is what I identify with? And then figure out how to do that in a way that's not appropriative, that uses elements, whatever those may be, that are available to you in a way that is respectful and ethical. Just figure out what it is. Because I totally get that there are things that are incredibly, like, this calls to me. I feel like this. Well, so figure out why. And once you know why, you can do the research and figure out a way to have that same feeling and to have that same connection in a way that is respectful and respects other cultures.
I really like that. That's a really good explanation. To bounce off of it, I was gonna say that for like the Philippines pre-colonially, you had kind of like the same ideas around spirituality, and you had a lot of communities that, like, it wasn't even a nation, so communication from like island A to island B could be that they were trading and they talked a lot, or it could be that they had no idea who each other were, or even that they were warring. But the thing that's kind of like the same throughout the entirety of what is now a nation, was that they would use what was just available to them. So if you have like a surplus of, like, a lot of people have dead nettle growing in their backyard and don't even know it, or like knowing that you can consume these things, knowing that you can burn these things, like those are all really good sources to have. And when I was starting out, I actually had gone to like a showcase for like a Native American community that was close by, and I wish I was old enough to remember the name of the community. But I was there and I was talking to one of the elders who had this like really great grasp on spirituality and like how it differs, and how also like some of it doesn't differ anymore because it's starting to kind of be appropriated into the mainstream. And one thing that he had told me that kind of resonated was that their particular practice wasn't necessarily closed to everyone if you weren't native or part of that particular community, but that you had to be initiated. And so for me, like practicing and knowing how to incorporate intersectionality, I think it comes from people and community, especially, and like seeking out people who know and elders or, just people who have been in it longer and talking and having these open conversations. I still have, he gifted me 2 pieces of Palo Santo, and I still have it in my home. And it just kind of reminds me of, you know, these things don't have to be like hidden or taboo anymore, but they should be respected. And I think a lot of that comes from respecting the people themselves and giving credit where credit is due. And if you have to be initiated, then go be initiated.
I love that.
Yeah.
Just on the subject, because I just remembered it. If anyone is curious about knowing whose indigenous land they live on, if you go to native-land.ca, it doesn't show you, for example, legal boundaries of treaties, but it does show you various territories, languages, treaties. So you can look up pretty much all of North America, all the way down to Mexico, South America. There's even a little bit in Africa, a little bit in Europe, Australia. I'm just taking a peek at the website right now because I remembered the URL. But if you go on there, you can see the various communities of Indigenous and whose land we live on. And if that's a resource where you're like, I want to do more work about, repairing my connections with Indigenous people, that's a great website to kind of start and get an idea of, okay, well, whose land am I even on to begin with? So for me, I know, for example, I'm just taking a look at it right now. I'm on the Katsi and Coast Salish territories, so you can see where they overlap and things like that. Oh, and Kelly popped it in the chat for us. Thank you. Awesome.
Gotta use my mod powers for good.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Do you have do any of you have any recommendations? Actually, before I move on, did everyone get a chance to speak? I'm sorry, I want to make sure I didn't cut anyone off. Okay, everyone's good. All right, I just wasn't, I couldn't remember for the life of me if I let everyone speak or not. Do you have any recommendations for resources that might be helpful to folks who want to learn more about intersectional witchery? Like, if someone's kind of new to this whole thing, but they're like, no, I really want to be more mindful in my practice, where should they begin? What's a good resource?
This is gonna sound a little counterintuitive, but don't approach it from the perspective of just your craft. Because there's so much stuff out there that will inform your understanding of intersectionality and both your own identity and the identities of others that isn't going to be labeled craft. That, in fact, if you Google intersectional witchcraft, like, you find some stuff, but it's not going to give you the same depth of knowledge that you would get if you listen to people, read their works, listen to them, to people who live at the actual intersections of some of these identities. I have learned more. I mean, I spent a lot of time on Twitter because one of the things with my disability is it's hard for me to go out and to socialize and to be around people. And so I spend a lot of time on Discord and Twitter and learning from folks, from people who share some of my intersections, but maybe not all of them. For example, fat Black disabled women. Looking at these experiences and being able to apply it to mine, so like, okay, we share a lot of intersections, but here's where my privilege identity makes my experience different. Those are the kind of things that are going to inform your craft. If you're, trying to practice intersectionality, broaden your bubble a little bit. Don't just Google intersectional witchcraft. Just try to listen to people who live there, and that will end up informing your craft because it changes the way you look at the world.
Yeah, it's kind of an oxymoron to be like, I want to be an intersectional witch, but I don't want to touch any of the rest of my life. It doesn't necessarily work that
That's not
way.
how intersectionality
No,
works.
because it's intersectionality. It touches on all of your intersections in all of your life. So that makes a lot of sense to me, actually.
Yeah, for sure. Would you mind just repeating the question? Just because
Yeah.
I was listening, I was like, "That's a really good point."
Absolutely. Basically, I was asking if you had any recommendations or resources that might be helpful to folks that want to learn a little bit more about intersectional witchcraft.
Oh man, I mean, what a perfect answer from Kelly. Um, Personally, right now, I've been seeing a lot of appropriation around like hoodoo and voodoo, like Southern American, Southern U.S. practices.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been going through 365 days of hoodoo. I'm trying to find the name of the author. Really good book, and there's this like really nice introduction. Obviously, not written for me, but it's kind of about like reclamation of like the black identity, but specifically of the US and what happened, and how it was very much like you had those like roots from Africa and kind of northern from there as well, and how those influenced a completely different community here.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a really great intro about how like incorporating those things, like Jess had talked about, how you kind of lose out on some of your ancestry, and how practicing like hoodoo or voodoo now is like a reclamation of that. So really, really awesome read, and I've been kind of going through it and seeing like where these different aspects come from. And so I would really recommend that book. And just in general, like resources are all out there. It just kind of takes like looking for them, and like Kelly had mentioned, not coming at it from like intersectional witchcraft, but if you're like, where does like such and such come from, I think that it's more important to get to like the root of that versus like how does it um how does it relate to like neo-paganism. It's
Mm.
like, of course you're going to get an appropriated answer by not just, going to where it was. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, 365 Days of Hoodoo, such a good book. I'm enjoying it so much.
I just googled it. It is called 365 Days of Hoodoo, Daily Rootwork, Mojo, and Conjuration. And the author, if you're gonna try and Google it, is Stephanie Rose Bird.
I was looking at it and I was like, I can't remember the author.
That's okay. I got you.
Thank you.
Stephanie Rose Bird. Jess, what about you? Any resources or wisdoms?
365 Days of Hoodoo is a good one. And it also has, the author includes like a list in the back of more resources, which is really useful. There are a lot of books like that that have at the back of the book, like information for where they got their information. Basically my answer for like resources comes down to what I feel like my answer always is somehow, which is research.
That's super valid though.
It's, I mean, basically just like seconding and thirding what Lucia and Kelly have said, which is that I think so much of learning about intersectional witchcraft, like in your intersectional practice, comes down to like not just settling for the first answer you find, and not just settling for like the easy put together kits or whatever that you might come across. All of those can be useful like introductions to what you're doing, but I think it's important to then take the time and put in the effort to find out where it all came from and what it all means and things like that. So 365 Days of Hoodoo I loved, and it led me to research about like so many different topics that I wouldn't have thought to look up before, that ended up having such an incredibly heavy influence on the rest of my craft. And it just wouldn't have happened if I didn't take that time to put in that extra research. So that's like basically like trying to figure out the history of like how hoodoo came to be, before really researching like what hoodoo would actually look like in my everyday practice. It just influenced what I do with my practice a lot.
Absolutely. I love that. I've heard a lot of good things about 365 Days of Hoodoo, and now I'm convinced that I absolutely need to pick this book up. One book that I've been praising all weekend long that I personally love is Queering Your Craft, Witchcraft from the Margins by Cassandra Snow. And that book also, it really made me, I found it was really inspirational. I found that I was really like emotionally touched by that book, and it made me feel really like I was like, no, this I have a right for this to be mine. And it made me feel like, okay, no, I can have this, you know. So I really I loved Cassandra Snow's take on witchcraft, but I definitely want to check out 365 days of hoodoo as well. Very briefly, if we can go around the table, I did see someone in chat, Todd Kelson 1963 was asking, what path do all of our panelists here follow? So if we want to just quickly go around the table and just touch on if we have a particular path. I mean, for me personally, I know that I consider myself an eclectic witch. I don't have anything in particular that I follow, so my answer is I don't know. But yeah, let's just quickly go around and touch on briefly, like what do we kind of, I guess, what's our label for ourselves, I guess.
Chaos.
That's a good answer.
It's like, it's eclectic, but it's also like, but I don't feel like smoke cleansing the house today, so I'm just gonna go around with 2 pots and be like, get out! I don't have time!
I love that.
I love it.
I would say the closest label there is to mine would be hoodoo or root work. But basically every part of my practice, again, like it starts from a place of researching something that already exists and personalizing it in a way that I feel like I resonate with it, and that feels like it's reflecting me and my beliefs, as well as respecting my ancestors. So if I were to put a label on things, and which I sometimes do just because it makes it easier to research things sometimes, it'd be a combination of like hoodoo, root work, and like green witchcraft.
Love it.
Yeah, so as I said, I am a Christian witch, which I think I don't actually think of as a path, because I think that still, oh boy, if you Google that, it is like appropriation and not necessarily the way I would want to approach things. So I don't really, again, consider, following a specific path. I love it, Lisa, just an appropriation rainbow. Yeah, pretty much.
Grand Central appropriation.
Yep. So I instead, I do incorporate elements of like green witchcraft and kitchen witchery into my practice. And then there's no path for this, but my sort of what brought me into witchcraft and the way that I approach my practice is outward reflecting. How do I, as I said before, how do I respect my identities as both, my oppressed identities and other, and making reparations and all that stuff, but also inward focusing, being a disabled person and being a fat person and living in a body that is both rejected by society and, quite frankly, rejected by me sometimes. And how do I come to terms with the body that I'm living in? And so my relationship with my body, the healthy bits, the not so healthy bits, the stuff that works and doesn't, is sort of the other half of my practice. And there's no real word for that. But I guess it comes down to self-acceptance, but like in a very disability justice kind of way.
Love it.
Make this as complicated as possible.
I mean, that's intersectionality. That's kind of what it is, right? Like it's examining all of those things, and it's not easy. It is complicated, and it's, you're unpacking things, and you're looking at tiny little details, and it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. I see two more questions in chat. One I'm going to say for our outro because I think it's a really sweet ending. And Lisa asked, many of us are solitary practitioners, but at a time when connection is precious, how do you recommend connecting with other witches?
Discord.
Discord. Honestly, yes.
Discord is awesome. Like online communities, I found are pretty welcoming. As long as you're kind of in it with the right people. I think also, like, again, mentioning like talking to elders and things like that. I think that as far as connecting with others, you there normally are places near you that are kind of centers for people who think like you and people who want to learn from you and people that want to teach you as well. It sounds so weird, but sometimes Facebook groups are like kind of lit. Sometimes you have to kind of like sort through, but then sometimes they're like, yeah, we just kind of host it here, and then we also have a Discord, and then you're like, cool, I can move over there.
Yeah, definitely social media, I think, is a big one. Like finding people on like Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, and then from there, hopefully finding something like a Discord server where they have a strong community built. I found that one of my big ones right now is actually Snapchat, which is mostly because occasionally some of my friends will just like send me a snap of like whatever witchy thing they're working on at the time. And it's like I always feel so awesome when I see that. Like anytime a friend sends me a snap of like they're working on a spell bag or they are putting together like something on their altar, I just have a moment where I'm like, this is wonderful. Whatever else is going on with my day, it doesn't matter. Thank you for sharing this part of your practice with me today. I love it. So that's I would say for me personally, Snapchat is a big part of how I'm connecting right now. But there's also like Discord servers and stuff like that.
Yeah, just to agreeing with what has been said, and then as I said, as a disabled person, I struggle between my physical disabilities and mental health stuff and social anxiety and all of those things. I really struggle with some of the in-person things, and so I've learned a lot from the disabled community online and how to make connections. And one of the things they say, and I think this absolutely applies to crafty spaces, and is how, quite frankly, I found the couple of, explicitly witchcrafty or tangentially crafty places that I'm sort of existing online now is, again, advice from the disabled community, which is you find the people who are reflecting the values that you want to be around. And then you just kind of, if they recommend people, then you bounce those people and you sort of start finding people. And eventually, it's not easy. And I say this as someone with social anxiety, it's not easy. But again, if you're finding people, you're like, oh, I'm going to follow this person on Twitter because I think what they say is important and their values match mine. They're not going to lead you to bad places. And if they start, you're like, oh, wait, never mind. And so like I found people, like that's honestly how I started following Lisa and I started following TK and a bunch of other things. And that's because I found out about the D20 Dames. I started following Jess and I'm like, okay, Jess and Kat and Brittany and all these people are people. I'm like, oh, these are people who share my values. Who did they interact with? And then you just follow that kind of chain. And I've ended up in this sort of amazing community. And so that's, and again, it's not easy. And so for people in chat saying they've had trouble, oh yeah, I am 31 years old. And for the first time in my life, this last year, I have a community where I feel like I belong. So it's hard. And it just happens when it happens. But yeah, that's kind of my advice, I guess.
Absolutely. I'm thinking a lot about Zoom and like video calls and like maybe practicing with other witches that way. That's something that I want to explore, or even like doing spells over text. That's something that was talked about in
Yes.
the Discord, and I was just like so curious about like emoji spells. Like what? Like I just want to know more. So that's kind of on my brain.
I missed that
But
and my mind is blown.
yeah, it's somewhere in Lisa's Discord. But unfortunately, that is all of the time we have. I know it went by so quick. We hit $3,000 for Bat Conservation International. I cannot thank you all enough. Audience, chat, y'all were rocking. It was so great having you all. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for ArCONa. Happy birthday, Lisa. And I am going to go in backwards order so that everyone can just very briefly reintroduce themselves, let the audience know where we can find you. And I would like you to end with what is your favorite part of your practice, if that is not too personal to talk about. And since we are going in backwards order, that would mean that Lucy is first.
Okay.
I was like, wait a minute, I was supposed to tell someone something.
You're like backwards order, and I was like, what does that mean? Yeah, so you can find me everywhere as Seer Sword. I really appreciate everybody who has kind of joined me as I'm kind of transitioning into adding more witch stuff into my like TTRPG stuff. But our book PDF is available on the Deck of Many, and then we're gonna have printed physical copies soon. I swear it's coming there as well. So that would really help me out, and then as well my entire Filipino team who's behind me. I really want to do more stuff with them. So the Islands of Sinauna is available for pre-order, and then also the PDF is like available, so you can get it now. You just have to wait for the book. I hope to do more fun stuff in the community. As far as like my favorite everyday thing, right?
Whatever you want, your favorite part of your practice.
I have a lot. I think again, like rediscovering the part of it that's attached to my bloodline has been really awesome for me. Just like knowing that for so long I was kind of like, I don't know if I should really practice this, and then just kind of finding that confirmation like within my own family has been really cool. And because we're talking about TTRPG, I love blessing my dice.
Aww.
I love blessing them like right before a session and just slaughtering my party with them. Awesome.
Remind me not to play with you.
Just that chaos magic in them, and they're like 20, 19, 17. And then I get to do it when I'm a player, so I die.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lucia. Next up is Jess.
Hi, thank you for having me, and happy birthday, Lisa. This has been a really fun panel. I'm Jess. You can find me on Twitter at WriteJessR. You can find my website and all of the stuff that I do, including D20 Dames, which Kelly shouted out earlier, on writejess.com, WRITEJESS. I think my favorite part of my practice is the way that I can use it to center myself. I have a witch's journal where I keep basically like reflections, where I write down like things that I learned. I'll put down if I'm creating my own spells or things like that. They all go into this one journal. And part of like writing in this journal almost feels like meditation to me. I sort of have like a ritual for it when I'm doing certain parts of writing in my journal. So it looks a little bit different if I'm writing down a new spell that I created versus if I'm writing down like things that I learned in my research that day versus if I'm writing down like reflections for what has changed in my life because of my practice recently. So that aspect of my practice is very important to me and very meaningful to me. And it's sometimes like the only thing that goes right if I'm having a really tough day or a really tough week. Being able to write in my journal and like have that ritual for myself is always just incredibly powerful and incredibly meaningful to me. So I think that's probably my favorite part.
Beautiful. And Kelly.
Yeah, so I am Kelly, otherwise known as Green Merdragon on all of the socials. I moonlight as a tiara maker, and I do a lot. I do a lot of witchy tiara things, using very specific crystals, doing different types of cleanses with them. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. I also am posting the link in chat right now because I remember to prep this. I am giving away this particular bat-inspired tiara that is made with Unakite, black jasper, and labradorite. So very witchy crystals, very protective, but also energizing type pieces. So go enter for that to win to benefit ArCONa. And yeah, that's me. I wasn't gonna share this because like, oh, that's too personal, but you know what? Screw it. I want to. So I talked a little bit about some of the, ancestor reparation stuff I do. Well, the other side of sort of my favorite thing that I do every day, even when I don't want to, is I check in with my body and I do a short ritual where I give thanks for every bit of fat, for every joint that doesn't work, for the scars and all of the things that make my body different or less than or broken. And I give thanks for them. And some days it's easier than it is other days. But yeah, that's something I do every day that is very grounding for me and sort of brings me to a place of, this is my body, it is mine, and I am grateful for it, even for the bits that aren't the way I would like them to be or aren't the way that society wants them to be. So that's something that is incredibly meaningful for me. And please steal that, by the way. That's why I decided to share it. If that in any way resonates with you, please steal it. So yeah.
It definitely resonates with me. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, because I think I'm going to incorporate that into my daily life. Because that speaks to me on a level. So thank you for your vulnerability. And my name is Leona. You can find me on Twitter at the Leona Maple. I have been your moderator for this final panel here at ArCONa. We have raised $3,000 for Bat Conservation International. I can't stop saying that because I'm so freaking excited about it. The best place to keep up with what the heck I'm up to is my Twitter. So please do feel free to follow me there. I am the person behind Maple Intersectionality Consulting. I help you work on whatever it is that you do, but mostly TTRPGs to make them more intersectional. I do sensitivity reads. I am the person behind Vibrant Legends, which is an all BIMPOC one-shot series. It takes place on the Dicey Amazons on Saturdays at 2 p.m. PST. If you're a BIMPOC, we would love to have you roll dice with us. I also am hoping to launch a podcast this year called Witchcrafting Intersectional Witchery. So if you are excited for that, I will talk more about that when that is coming out on my Twitter. And I think that's everything. I hope that's everything. Well, if it's not, you'll find out about it on my Twitter. So just go there. Okay. That's the whole point of this, is just go there. I honestly think that my favorite part of my practice has honestly been the fact that I get to share it with my partner. And that's really what's allowed me to intensify my practice and to really become intentional about it. And it's that connection and the privilege I have of being able to learn from her and do things with her that has been, oh my God, I'm getting emotional. It's so deeply special to me because I didn't know I had anyone to share that with. So there's just something very sacred and special about that. So that is my favorite part about witchcraft, is sharing it with someone. I want to thank all of my panelists for being so vulnerable and open and talking about intersectionality, because it is my passion, and all of you were phenomenal. It was an honor to be your moderator for this panel and to let you shine and talk about this amazing topic. Thank you once again to the audience, to chat. Thank you, Lisa, for hosting ArCONa this year. Don't go anywhere. I believe we're about to do a raid, and Lisa is going to say a few words, but that is it for us, everyone. Bye.
All right. Oh my goodness. Leona crying kind of got me started again. So thanks for that. I'm just going to put Leona in charge of the Zoom meeting and leave that. And hi, everybody. Hi. We raised $3,400 freaking dollars for bats. So I wanted to say a few words. I've got some thank yous to do as well. But Jess, a Dracul Dragon in the chat, reminded me in the midst of ArCONa today that, a feeling, heck, okay, hold on, everyone, I have to compose myself. Woo! Reminded me that a year ago I was talking to her about how I kind of want to stream witchy stuff, but I don't know if anybody cares about that side. Like, everyone just wants to see tabletop and specifically D&D things from me, and I don't know if this is really going to resonate with my community, but it's where my passion is. It's where my joy is, and Jess very much encouraged me to explore that. And I started streaming Tarot Tuesdays and interacting with this amazing community. And oh my goodness, like at the start of that, I did not know my tarot as well as I wanted to. And by the end of that, I feel like I'm a much more confident tarot reader, but also more than that, found this community that was so supportive and loved the same things I loved, and just made my life feel more full. And this weekend, I got to celebrate this really cool intersection of two communities that I adore, listen to all these topics that I wanted to hear about, and celebrate with you all while raising, again, $3,000 frickin' dollars for bats, who are pollinators in general, are really, really important to me because our food systems and our ecosystems are some of the causes that I personally feel very, very strongly about. And bats don't get a lot of love because there's so much incorrect myths out there about them. But I think those $3,000 that we raised while learning a lot about bats and bat facts and witchcraft and tabletop ideas and games we all need to go get now was amazing. And I think it's going to make a really huge difference. So let me do some thank yous. First, I want to thank all of our various panelists today. I thanked yesterday's panelists yesterday. So today is Celeste Conowitch, Natalia Dean, Jackie Leung, Samantha Puck, who we're going to raid in a little bit, Adriel Wilson, Lynn Meyer, Briad Dedanen, I'm sorry, I keep saying your name wrong, Elizabeth Chipraticool, Antonio Demico, Dan Lehman Kennedy, Kat Cool, Nikki Jeske, TK Johnson, Leona Maple, Kelly Shaver, Jessica Ross, and Lucia Verspreel. Thank you. Day Danon. Is that right? Sorry, I'm seeing Bree trying to help me pronounce in the chat. Thank you, panelists, so much for volunteering your time and helping us raise funds. There were many other volunteers who were involved and helped make ArCONa possible. So I want to thank our tarot readers, our volunteer tarot readers, all really intuitive, strong, amazing readers who are doing readings for some folks who donated. That's Friday Elliott, Sarah Lamascus, Kintz de Vera. I want to thank Meredith Gerber for making this lovely card you're looking at now and all our overlays and many of our graphics. I want to thank Heather, who was our original Bat Fact researcher. But then I also want to thank all of our moderators, including Jess Dempsey, who collected all the bat facts you saw in chat and created a prompt for those, and Kelly Shaver, Jonathan Boyle, and April Raygun. Seriously, moderators, I don't know what I was thinking, considering even for a second that I could do this without that fantastic crew. I appreciate you all so so much, so beyond. If you want to support any of the folks that I mentioned and the folks involved yesterday, if you go to lisapenrose.com/ArCONa 2021 and click on people's beautiful faces, that goes to their social media profiles. I think our tarot readers, it goes to where you can book tarot readings with them. You can find VODs of everything going up next week at youtube.com/lisapenrose. And for the rest of the day, you can still shop ArCONa Alley, get some cool deals, support some small businesses that will also donate their proceeds on top of the $3,000 we're already donating. Whew. Okay, I mostly got through that without crying, except for at the beginning there. But I'm not going to hold it together much longer. So I heard my husband come home. So I'm going to go cry in his arms. And we are going to, let's see if I remember how to raid. I'm so emotional. /raid the verbal thing, who I believe is playing Animal Crossing. I think that's what they're doing. They usually do Animal Crossings. Oh no, Stardust? Oh no, it's Animal Crossing. Yeah, get ready for some Animal Crossing New Horizons. Thank you, everybody.